Hey there, my friends. Hope you're all staying warm out there. If you're in an area that is experiencing these frigid temperatures we've been having, hell, our wind chill factor was in the single digits this morning. I think it was like 8 or 9 degrees, and I'm in lower Alabama, which I understand. Our cold, it doesn't even compare to a lot of colds out there. But anyhow, just hope you are all staying warm. Today we're just going to talk about fat a little bit, how much fat on a plant-based diet. And this is going to be another one of those videos I'll tell you right away. This is just kind of me pointing you in a direction. I've talked a few times about omega-3 recently, or in the last few months anyway. And I've just really started doing a deep dive on fat, cholesterol, HDL, LDL, monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, and all that stuff is to how it affects our cardiovascular health and our brain health. Because like I say, just 2 months away from being 60, and that brain health is uber important to me. Now, I'm basically just sharing here from my notes. I write notes down for myself so I can kind of just keep things straight. But this is the kind of stuff, like I say, I refer to some because I've been listening to a lot of my favorite podcasts, which I've talked a lot about in recent months. The Proof with Simon Hill. And one thing I like about that podcast, I'll tell you if you haven't heard me say it before, I really appreciate the tone of the podcast, and also appreciate that a lot of it is just like non-emotional. Like his guests on there are constantly citing studies. And I think for most of the videos, Simon actually leaves links to these studies in the show notes, so you can get a lot of that there. Because I could never debate this stuff, I could never teach this stuff, because like I say, my old fuzzy brain just doesn't retain things. There's a whole lot of people out there. There's a ton of people out there. I think in health in general, there's all these contrarian movements that just like, I think they're just contrarian just to be contrarian. And there's people out there right now saying that, cholesterol levels don't matter. None of that matters to your cardiovascular health. And they've got their own spin on the science, but I'd say at least, even if, and listen, like I say, if that's your belief, I can neither help you nor will I debate you. Go over to a platform like Simon's where he's got experts on there and debate with them, however you feel on the subject. And it's also for vegans. I think there's a lot of vegans, and throughout the years, my thoughts have changed a little bit on the fat, because I've heard these studies cited that a lot of times these uber low-fat plant-based people, all the people that are like, I gotta be below 10%, I'm uber, I don't add anything, don't necessarily fare as well in a lot of studies and peer-reviewed papers that are being written. So, like I say, just something to think about and decide for yourself. I started like really breaking down. I kind of just have my haphazard way about doing with fats. Like I'm mostly focused on things like the flax seeds and the chia seeds and the hemp seeds. But I wanted to kind of break that stuff down and really learn about the monounsaturated, the polyunsaturated, the different types, and how they're good for us. Now, number one, and this is something that I'll say to the vegans before I even get started, or my other plant-based friends out there, is saturated fat. And that's another one too. There's vegans and there's anti-vegans that are like, oh, well, the saturated fat doesn't matter all that much. Saturated fat is a killer. Listen, you're not going to change my mind on that. I can't make you believe anything, but that saturated fat is a killer. And when you start paying attention to saturated fat, here's where it gets tricky for these people that are eating all the processed stuff, all the fake burgers, all these I used to enjoy, now I don't get the stuff. I didn't do it very much, but every once in a while I'd crave some macaroni and cheese. I'd go to the store. Once I started looking at the saturated fat and the sodium in these things, that's the combination, saturated fat and sodium, that I realized, like, yeah, I can't touch that stuff because it's just full of it. So what are the good substitutes for saturated fat? And that's monounsaturated fat and polyunsaturated fat. Now, the monounsaturated fat includes things like avocados, pumpkin seeds, almonds, cashews, almond butter, which I just had some almond butter this morning, and the vegetable oils. Now, I rarely use oil, but I also too think that the oils have been demonized, and I don't know. I will say I think for some there might be a place in for oil in all this, or that it's not necessarily the demon that you think it is. Now, also too, that would depend. I'm sure there's a lot of nuances to that. Does someone already have cardiovascular disease? What are their numbers? Things like that. But the problem with oil, which I used a little bit today, as a matter of fact, thing with oil is so much of the time, people are not going to use a tablespoon. People are not going to use a very certain portion just for the health benefits it might bring. They tend to tip that bottle, and it can get away from you, especially if you're pouring it on salads. You think you're just drizzling it on, and before you know, you've got 3 tablespoons of oil in there. For reference, I cooked a pot of lentils this morning, and there's enough, like this is basically 3 days worth of lentils. I put 1 tablespoon of oil in there. So you're talking about 1 tablespoon of oil split between 3 meals, maybe even 4 meals, we'll see. But anyhow, these monounsaturated fats help lower your LDL cholesterol and can raise your HDL cholesterol, and they help maintain the overall health of cells. And the biggest thing, like I say, a lot of vegans, we think we're bulletproof, or plant-based people, whatever you choose to call yourself, that you can't have these things. But plant-based people have heart disease. Plant-based people have heart attacks. They have strokes. And keeping your LDL level low reduces your risk for heart disease and stroke. Now, there's another one that I hear them talking about on Simon's show as well all the time that is actually a better indicator of that. But a lot of places, when you go in for a physical or when you're getting blood work done, they don't test for that, and it's something called ApoB, so you might want to look into that. And then we have the polyunsaturated fats, and the 2 types of that, there are omega-3s and omega-6s. They also help lower your LDL, and they're essential for body functions, play a role in building cell membranes and blood clotting. And these include sunflower seeds, flax seeds, walnuts, Brazil nuts, and as like I say, for the omega-3s, you want it, you're getting your the seeds. I'm mostly trying to get my omega-3s through the flax, the chia, and the hemp seeds, but also walnuts. Once I started really getting into looking at the nuts and the exact things that each one brought to the table, I try to add walnuts in on a regular basis. And let me just say this about nuts, kind of in the same spirit that I was talking about the oils. People tend to be scared of the nuts because so many people have issues with nuts. So many people have issues, what I'm talking about here, of not being able to control how much they eat. And I can feel you there. I used to be like that. I remember when I first went plant-based, and I was keeping my fat low, but I would, every couple of weeks, every 3 weeks, I'd watch a movie at night, and I'd get a bag of nuts, and I would eat them. And I had to really, if I kept more than I needed to eat in just one time, I was always eating nuts. I just kind of lost that. I don't have this big, I really like this, I want to overeat them. So when I eat nuts, I'm using about the amount that fits in the palm of your hand. And I don't mean like you scoop it up where your hand's full. I'm talking about in the palm of your hand up to where your fingers connect to your palm. So I'm not using a lot of these, and I don't advocate that you use a lot of this, but I think we do need this healthy fat in our diet, and I think there's a lot of people that are probably missing out. Now, once again, as I've mentioned a lot of times, I haven't done any blood work. I think very soon, because that's not an expensive test. I'm going to get my omega-3s checked in the next couple of months. But sometime this year, I'd like to get more blood work done just to see where I stand on all of it. But yeah, like I say, just the fat is nuanced, and sometimes we see our favorite YouTuber or somebody maybe you follow on Instagram, and the way that they talk, or maybe they've got 1 million followers or whatever, and people get caught up in these extremes, or they get caught up in this mindset, and a lot of times you haven't even stepped back and studied anything about this. So I think that 10%, I don't find that any holy number. I think even like I say, up to maybe 20%. Some people do as well, women do as well with 25%. But especially for me, I am heading into my 60s. I am really focused on the things that people tend to have problems with as they get older. So my brain health and my cardiovascular is very important to me. So anyhow, what I'll do is I'm going to put some links to some of my favorite talks, because on Simon's show, there's not like one of them, there's multiple ones. I'll try to go down and link 3 or 4 of them down here of my favorites, but all you got to do is go to wherever you get your podcast. I get mine on my iPhone, and you go in there and you search. You search The Proof with Simon Hill, and then after that, just type in, like you're doing a Google search, fat or cholesterol or cardiovascular, or you put all 3, and you will get probably 5, 6, 7 really good talks that will come up on this. They're a little long, but who knows? When you're in your car, listen to some of it. When you're in the gym, listen to some of it. And even if it's a 2 or 3 hour talk, you can consume. I mean, it's not like over a period of a week you're not consuming something. And this is some really good stuff. So anyhow, hope you guys enjoyed this one today. If you like it, please give me a thumbs up. Have a great rest of the week, and I should see you at least one more time before the week's done. Peace.